Hey, you all, this is the final one of these recordings and the final one of your commonplace book entries. Aren't you excited? Yay! I hope you all are doing well. I really do miss seeing your faces. And if we didn't hear that hugely annoying motorcycle in the background, I'd be talking more. What we've got then is we've got one final entry into our discussion of general versus specific. Why do I say that? Why do I call it that? Let's look at the title of this, Theories of Specialized Discourses and Writing Fellows Programs. This was written a while ago, but it still offers a healthy commentary and a counterpoint to the kinds of readings that we've done so far. Just looking on our website, you would notice, if you were to look at the tentative schedule, that we've moved through an argument about the value of thinking about every discipline as its own discourse community, as its own way of speaking, as its own way of thinking and writing. And so in different kinds of ways, I think the field has been beset by different kinds of arguments for the value of trying to train students for any number of different kinds of discourses they might face in the future. So what we've got is we've got Liz Wardle saying, listen, compositionists aren't aware of where students go next, and they often assign mutt genres that don't have any particular kind of value outside of composition courses like English 130, and don't really prepare students for the world of writing beyond. That's a pretty strong argument, right? We've got Clark saying we got to address genre in the writing center. She says there's all kinds of things that one could do in order to help students understand the differences between arguing in history versus arguing in biology, or the arguments or the writings that one might do in sociology versus in electrical engineering. We've then got Gordon saying beyond generalist versus specialist, and Soliday and the value of general readers. And finally, Severino's Theories of Specialized Discourses. Where does this take us? Well, of course, with Severino and Traschel's article called Theories of Specialized Discourses and Writing Fellows Programs, we've got the entirely different argument. On the one hand, we had people who were saying each different discipline, each different department has its own set of values, its own set of terms, its own habitus, Bourdieu would call it, its own way of thinking about the world and articulating its sense of the values of the assumptions in that world. On the other hand, we have people who value a kind of a generalist approach. Now, why is this important? Because you, as writing center tutors, as writing fellows, as working in writing workshop situations, may face a number of different kinds of students who have a number of different kinds of majors. And why is that important? Because we have to be attuned to the differences in perspective that those teachers might have about how one uses language. This is the essential thing that I think we're working toward in this course, is this notion that there could be differences in the ways in which people communicate. So where does that take us in this argument? Well, what they say, of course, is they say in our search for answers, they did several things. First, they suggest that at their university there may be more similarities than differences in the undergraduate writing assignments that instructors give. They also say writing fellows themselves, after exposure to these kinds of debates between general and specialized discourses and tutors, preferred the generalist over the specialist position in their work as writing fellows. This also, I think, extends to writing center tutors. So where does this get us? It gets to us to a couple of points. I hope it doesn't undermine our sense of why we're doing this project. But I think it locates us in a range of different kinds of arguments that span the continuum for very strongly kind of isolationist in its own way and discipline specific, and on the other hand, a recognition of the value of the similarities in discourse in different kinds of classes. What do they go on to say? Well, they say a couple of important things that I'll just highlight really quickly and I'll ask you to think about. First things first, They say this conversation, the one that we've been having in composition and rhetoric for quite some time, is further complicated by its intersection with much larger academic debates about the purposes of general education and the values of the liberal arts tradition. What does that mean? Well, let's think about our own training. You go to Chico State, you take classes. Some are GE classes and some are major classes. Just the notion of a GE program means that there is some kind of generalized sense of being literate that the university wants us to achieve, that there's a generalized sense of what academic inquiry might entail. There's a generalized sense of how to communicate as educated people that Chico State wants to foist upon us. That sounds unduly negative, doesn't it? But that's exactly what it is. I would imagine if I asked all of you sitting in a class right now, and I miss that terribly, to say, how are the papers that you've written for different courses different? And how are they the same? You'd have lots and lots of answers. But I'd imagine that a lot of you would say some version of, well, I wrote discussion posts in all of them. And they were all 250 words long. And they all kind of involved saying something important about the reading and then expanding on it. That doesn't sound like it's different in each class. It sounds like it's strangely similar, strangely the same as all the other courses that you've taken. But I think that there's some of you who might say, yeah, but there's other courses where it seems like there's something very specific going on. That is, we're learning to write a lab report, and I haven't seen that lab report in any other context. We're learning to do genetics research, and I haven't done that anywhere else. We're in the linguistics lab, and we're doing kind of spectrum analysis, and I don't do that anywhere else. And when I write about it, I feel like I'm on my own. I'm unique. I'm separate. The writing that I'm doing is specialized. So I think you all are located in the exactly right place in order to have these kinds of conversations about what it means to be a specialized tutor, that is, people who are good at analyzing literature, building literary arguments, or a more generalist tutor, one who could say, I can tutor well in the humanities, or I think I can tutor well at the undergraduate level, or I think I can tutor you well in GE courses. All of those are ways of generalizing. And all of those things are something that we should treasure. The work that they did right here, right at the beginning, you will notice that they theorized and summarized the debates for us. On the one side, a model that presumes that WAC student writers are mystified by the lack of transfer between the kind of general writing courses they'd take and the other specialized ways of knowing later on in the curriculum. And there is a kind of support for that in the different kinds of research that's gone on. And I think it's important for us to value that. At the same time, it seems clear that exaggerating the importance of these disciplinary boundaries discourages students from engaging in creative cross-disciplinary ways of thinking. I can't tell you how many times that I've been working with faculty who have the same or similar kinds of assignments. I can't tell you how many times there's been a cross-listed class where half of the people in the class are history majors and the other half are Asian American literature students. I can't tell you any number, so many times, that I've come across different kinds of ways of assigning writing that turn out to be similar. So in this, what we've got then is we've got a belief on the one hand that students must be socialized into distinct disciplinary communities according to these researchers. That seems misplaced in undergraduate education because it reflects particular values of the research community. And we just haven't done that yet at the undergraduate level. So we need some balance. What does that then mean? That means that we need to figure out the different kinds of meta disciplines or meta genres that might exist for students in a variety of different courses. Problem solving, empirical inquiry, research from sources, and performance all seem to characterize different kinds of ways of knowing that may be very valuable for students as undergrads. So, what does that mean for us? That means in different kinds of ways, our project takes on a renewed value. And what do I mean by that? Well, far from undermining the purposes of this particular project, I think it really reasserts for us the value of thinking about in what ways is history writing different from English? And in what ways is sociology different from psychology? To get specific about it doesn't mean giving up on those differences, but rather just to figure out how different the differences actually are. What does this mean in practice then? Let's just take this a little bit further. There's lots of ways in which people assign assignments that seem the same. Personal essays about what it means to be educated, for example. And there's lots of ways in which writing fellows, what they're calling workshop leaders who are attached to different kinds of courses, what we'd call embedded mentors, can be very valuable. Now, the argument against placing writing center people and workshop leaders, embedded mentors, in places where they don't major was this right here, that a tutor with content and genre expertise could be prone to correct the content and genre, becoming like a teacher, paying more attention to product than process. Now, we've seen that argument before. We've seen it in the last two pieces that we looked at. When you ask English majors about the value of non-English tutors in working with English major papers, they will report that non-majors seem not to know exactly what the genre of literary analysis was, how to elicit it from the writer, and how to organize the results of their elicitations. However, although the tutoring sessions with non-majors did not significantly improve the draft, were rated low by literature instructors, they were still evaluated as helpful interactions by the student participants. Oh, isn't that interesting? And that's a valuation, again, of this kind of principle that we started with, the value of the tutor as outsider. Not people who do not know, right, or are not curious, but people who are outside of the discourse community and thus need to ask questions in order to understand. So do these writing fellows see themselves as generalists or specialists? It seems clear that going through the debate with people like Natalie and Ginny and Alex and Megan and Molly and Claire, it seems very important that what they reassert is that they, as generalists, seem better prepared to work with students. Ginny says right here, I have found that my ability to relate to the students I work with relies heavily on my ability to show my own weaknesses. Students are less hostile toward me as a person and more receptive to my ideas for their writing when I intersperse my comments with I don't know. What do you think? Because I'm clearly not an expert in the subject I'm tutoring, the writing conferences I hold with my students are collaborative. They are true peer-to-peer conversations. My uneasiness about the subject matter my students are working with keeps me humble and furthermore maintains an excellent balance of power. The student gets to be an expert in the class and the material we are working with, while I can assume the role of an expert in basic writing techniques. Now, I blanch a little bit at the notion of basic, because none of this stuff is basic, but I think her point remains the same, and that is that her power comes through having a conversation as much as possible as equals, right? So what does this mean? The follow-up research they did reasserts this notion that there are certain kinds of meta-generic types. That is, there are kinds of assignments that professors often give that seem to fit into broad categories. Like they say here, there's going to be a lot of people who say textual analysis is what they want students to do. Textual synthesis, the lit review. Textual comparisons, compare A with B. Application of course concepts to real-world situations, and oh my God, that's a common one, right? Or personalizing of course knowledge. That is, make it relevant to you. So, what have we got then? We've got the finale of this essay then is a reassertion of the basic points that we've been driving toward in this section of the course. And that is that Writing Center tutors need to be aware of these disciplinary differences to the extent that they exist. And yet they need to reassert their generalist credentials to work with writing in a variety of different stages, a variety of different assignments, a variety of different purposes for writing, audiences for writing, genres for writing, and so on. But we need not be limited by them. In your work over the next couple of weeks, and that's all that we have left, I'm hoping that what you can do is you can find out for yourselves, using primary research of various kinds and secondary research of various kinds, the extent to which writing that appears in a particular major or minor or unit or program or specialty or discipline or department, the extent to which that seems to be different from other kinds of discourses. Tell us what you find by researching this place, this thing, this series of courses, and help us make sense of it. Prepare some kind of small, technical writing guide that will allow students to see at a glance what they need to do with writing assignments they get from those kinds of classes. I am open to anything that you all put together as a proposal for this particular project, but I hope that what you can do then is you can start to explore it on your own and work up your best sense of what seems to be going on there. I have enjoyed doing these little talks because it makes me feel like I'm in the classroom again. I'm not under the assumption that everyone is watching them, but I do hope that you give a listen just a little bit to see what's going on and to reconnect with the class and with the people who we used to be when we were a class together. So that's it. Thank you so much.